There are killers who hide in the shadows, terrified of being caught. And then, there are the architects of chaos. In the late 1960s, the San Francisco Bay Area wasn't just terrorized by a murderer, it was held hostage by a brand. A symbol. A crosshair. He claimed 37 lives. He threatened to blow up school buses. He turned the front pages of newspapers into his personal diary. He gave himself a name that would eclipse Jack the Ripper in the annals of American crime, the Zodiac. For 50 years, the FBI, the CIA, and thousands of independent researchers have tried to solve the algorithm of his identity. They failed. Today, we don't just look at the timeline. We deconstruct the psyche, the ciphers, and the suspects of the most dangerous animal of all. Act 1. The Canon. 1. The debut, Lake Herman Road. December 20th, 1968. Benicia, California. It is a freezing night on Lake Herman Road, a gravel turnout known locally as a lover's lane. David Faraday, 17, and Betty Lou Jensen, 16, are on their first official date. They are just kids. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Until 11:15 p.m. A second car pulls in. The stalker doesn't park alongside them. He boxes them in. He exits the vehicle. Forensics tell us he fired a warning shot into the rear window. Panic ensues. They exit the car. Faraday is shot at point-blank range behind the ear. Jensen runs. She makes it 28 feet before 5 bullets strike her back. This wasn't a robbery. No money was taken. This was hunting. 2. The phone call, Blue Rock Springs. July 4th, 1969. The Zodiac returns. Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau sit in a car at Blue Rock Springs Park. Around midnight, a car pulls up behind them. The driver leaves, then returns minutes later. He walks to the passenger window with a blinding flashlight. He opens fire with a 9mm Luger. Mageau is hit in the jaw, shoulder, and leg. Ferrin is hit multiple times. But the most chilling part isn't the shooting. It's what happened 40 minutes later. At 12:40 a.m., the Vallejo Police Department receives a call. The voice is low, monotonous, rehearsed. I want to report a double murder. If you will go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway to a public park, you will find the kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye. 3. The Monster at the Lake, Berryessa. September 27th, 1969. The Zodiac changes the game. This is the only time he strikes during the day. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard are relaxing at Lake Berryessa. They see a man watching them. He moves behind a tree. When he reappears, he is wearing a costume straight out of a medieval nightmare. He has a gun, but he doesn't shoot. He wants to talk. He tells them a lie about being an escaped convict from Montana. He wants their car. He wants their money. He ties them up with plastic clothesline. And then the mask slips. He draws a knife. He stabs Hartnell 6 times. He stabs Shepard 10 times. As they bleed out, he walks to their car door and writes his resume. Act 2. The algorithm, the ciphers. Most serial killers are driven by lust or rage. The Zodiac was driven by intellectual vanity. He began sending letters. This is the Zodiac speaking. He sent 3 parts of a cipher to 3 different newspapers, demanding they be published or he would kill again. This was the 408 cipher. It took a high school teacher and his wife just 20 hours to crack it. The message was a window into madness. I like killing people because it is so much fun. Man is the most dangerous animal of all. But he lied. He said the cipher would reveal his name. It didn't. The 340 paradox. Then came the 340 cipher, sent in November 1969. This grid of 340 symbols confounded the FBI, the NSA, and naval intelligence for half a century. It wasn't until December 2020 that a team of programmers, David Oranchak, Sam Blake, and Jarl Van Eyck, broke the code. The Zodiac didn't just substitute letters. He shifted the pattern diagonally. He made a mistake in the second row that acted as a glitch, locking the code for decades. When finally read, the voice from 1969 spoke again. "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show. I am not afraid of the gas chamber. No name, just more ego."
Please leave me, sir. Let me go.
By 1970, the Bay Area was in lockdown. People didn't stop for strangers. They checked their back seats. But the Zodiac adapted. If he couldn't surprise you in a park, he would trap you on the highway. Kathleen Johns was 22 years old and 7 months pregnant. She was driving her station wagon down Highway 132 near Modesto. In the passenger seat was her 10-month-old daughter. It was late. The road was empty, until a car pulled up behind her. The driver honked. He flashed his lights. He pulled alongside her, rolling down his window, shouting that her rear wheel was wobbling, that the lug nuts were loose. It was a classic predator tactic: create a problem, then offer the solution. She pulled over. The man was polite, clean cut. He wore horn-rimmed glasses and a light jacket. He offered to tighten the bolts, but he didn't tighten them. He removed them. When she tried to drive away, the wheel spun off instantly. Her car was crippled. The man returned, appearing concerned. He offered to drive her to the nearest gas station. Vulnerable, pregnant, and stranded with an infant, Kathleen Johns made the only choice she thought she had. She got into the stranger's car. The ride started normally. But then, they passed the first service station. He didn't stop. He drove past the next one, and the next. According to Johns, for nearly 2 hours, he drove her aimlessly through the darkness of the San Joaquin Valley. When she asked why he wasn't stopping, he stopped speaking. The polite stranger evaporated. He turned to her and said 5 words that froze her blood: "You are going to die." He wasn't taking her to a location. The ride was the torture. At a stop sign, Kathleen saw her chance. Clutching her baby, she threw the door open and jumped into a drainage ditch. She hid in the tall grass, terrified he would come back. The man stopped, shined his flashlight into the field for a moment, and then he drove away. A passing driver picked her up and took her to the Patterson police station. As she gave her statement, her eyes drifted to a wanted poster on the wall. It was the sketch of the man who shot Paul Stine in San Francisco. She screamed. "That's the man," she said. "That's the man who picked me up." The police found her car later that night. It had been burned and gutted. Months later, the Zodiac sent a letter confirming the encounter. He wrote, "There is a rather interesting story about the woman and her baby. I burned her car up." Kathleen Johns survived, but the incident proved something terrifying about the Zodiac. He didn't just want to kill. He wanted to possess. He wanted to drive a pregnant woman around for hours, savoring her fear like a fine wine. It remains one of the few times his mask slipped, and he let a witness walk away. To understand the end of the Zodiac, we must go back to the beginning. 2 years before the murders on Lake Herman Road, A shadow was already moving through Southern California. Riverside, 1966. The Zodiac wasn't a celebrity yet. He was just a ghost in the stacks of a library. Sherry Jo Bates was an 18-year-old freshman at Riverside City College. On the night of October 30th, she went to the campus library to study. She parked her Volkswagen Beetle on a dark street nearby. When she came out, her car wouldn't start. The engine turned over, but it wouldn't catch. Forensics later revealed that the distributor wire had been deliberately pulled loose. It was a trap. Just like Kathleen Johns 4 years later, the killer disabled the vehicle to create a dependency. He was watching, waiting for the moment of panic. He offered to help, but he didn't fix the car. He led her into a dark gravel driveway between two abandoned houses. There, the facade ended. He attacked her with a small knife. A struggle ensued, terrifying and brutal. Sherry Jo Bates fought for her life. She scratched his face, trapping skin and hair under her fingernails. But she didn't make it out of that alley. The police had no leads, no suspects. But then, the letters began. 1 month later, the local police and the newspaper received a typed letter titled The Confession. It read, "She was young and beautiful, but now she is battered and dead. She is not the first, and she will not be the last. I am not sick. I am insane." The tone was arrogant, mocking, clinical. It was the birth of the Zodiac persona, even if he hadn't named himself yet. But the most chilling piece of evidence wasn't found in the mail. It was found on a desk. The tone was arrogant, mocking, clinical. It was the birth of the Zodiac persona, even if he hadn't named himself yet. But the most chilling piece of evidence wasn't found in the mail. It was found on a desk. Months later, a janitor at the college library discovered a poem scratched into the underside of a wooden desk. It was titled, "Sick of Living/Unwilling to Die." The handwriting was erratic. The imagery was gruesome. Cut. Clean. If red/clean. Blood spurting/dripping/spilling. Sherwood Morrill, the California Department of Justice's top handwriting expert, later confirmed it. The writing on the desk in Riverside matched the letters sent by the Zodiac in San Francisco. The Zodiac had been a student, or an employee, at that library. And this brings us to the suspect who walks the halls of Riverside. A man who worked at that very library. A man who wore military boots. A man who disappeared from the area the moment the investigation heated up. The Riverside murder isn't just a cold case. It is the key to the identity of the Zodiac. If you ask the police, the prime suspect was Arthur Lee Allen. He checked every box. 1. He owned a Zodiac Sea Wolf watch. 2. He wore size 10.5 wing walker boots, the exact print found at Lake Berryessa. 3. He told his friend Don Chaney in 1968 that he planned to kill couples and call himself Zodiac. 4. He had a genius IQ but was socially maladjusted and a known pedophile. But the physical evidence saved him. His DNA didn't match the saliva on the stamps. His handwriting didn't match the letters. Was Allen a copycat? Or was he the killer, and did someone else write the letters? Suspect B, Lawrence Kane, the Shadow. Then there is Lawrence Kane. Kane suffered brain damage in a 1962 car accident, stripping him of the ability to control primitive urges. He worked in the same hotel as Donna Lass, a potential Zodiac victim who vanished. The sister of Darlene Ferrin identified Kane as the man who had been stalking Darlene days before her murder. And in the Ciphers, some claim an anagram of Kane is hidden in the geometry. Suspect C, Ross Sullivan, the librarian. The most visually compelling suspect is Ross Sullivan. He worked at the Riverside Library where Sherry Jo Bates was murdered in 1966, a crime linked to the Zodiac. Look at the face. The heavy glasses. The widow's peak hair. The stocky build. Sullivan was institutionalized for schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. He wore military boots. When the police interviewed him, he didn't have an alibi. But just like the others, the evidence trail went cold. The conspiracy, the DNA, and the hoax. We live in the age of genetic genealogy. The Golden State Killer was caught because a distant relative uploaded their DNA to a website. So why is the Zodiac, a man who licked stamps, sealed envelopes, and left bloody fingerprints, still a ghost? The answer lies in the biology of failure. The DNA dead end. In 2002, the San Francisco Police Department developed a partial DNA profile from saliva found on a stamp. The results were explosive. The DNA did not match Arthur Leigh Allen. For the FBI, this was a closed door. But for us, it's a question mark. Here is the problem. The Zodiac didn't necessarily lick the stamps. He was an avid reader of detective magazines. He knew about forensics. It is highly probable he used a sponge or water. Furthermore, the DNA sample was taken from the outside of the stamp, meaning it could belong to the postman, a clerk, or a police officer who mishandled the evidence in 1969. We aren't looking at the killer's DNA. We are looking at a contaminated history. The multiple killer hypothesis. This leads us to the most disturbing theory of all. The reason the physical evidence contradicts the suspects is that we are chasing two different ghosts. Theory: the committee. Person A was the killer, the heavy-set man at the crime scenes. Impulsive. Violent. Person B was the writer, the intellectual who crafted the ciphers and mailed the letters. This explains the discrepancies. Why the handwriting didn't match Allen. Why the DNA didn't match the sketches. The Zodiac wasn't a man. It was a partnership. A brand built on blood. The great hoax. But there is a darker possibility. What if the Zodiac never existed? Some researchers, including Thomas Horan, argue that the Zodiac was a media invention. Consider the facts. The killings were vastly different. A pistol in a parking lot. A knife at a lake. A taxi execution in the city. These are the works of different men. The theory suggests that a journalist, or a rogue homicide detective, wrote the letters to link unrelated cold cases together. They created a supervillain to sell newspapers and gain fame. If this is true, then the 340 cipher isn't a message from a killer. It is a tombstone for the truth. We haven't caught the Zodiac because you cannot catch a fiction. The final verdict. So where does that leave us? Was it Arthur Leigh Allen, the monster who got away? Was it Ross Sullivan, the silent shadow? Or was it a phantom created by our own obsession with fear? 50 years later, the letters have stopped. The phone lines are dead. The gun is cold. But the fear remains. Because somewhere, in a box of evidence in San Francisco, the answer is waiting. The algorithm is there. We just haven't finished the code. Act 4. The theories. What if the reason the Zodiac was never caught is that the Zodiac didn't exist? Theory 1. The team, the committee. Narrator. The team theory suggests the Zodiac was two people. One killer, perhaps Allen or Kane, who did the dirty work. One writer, perhaps a journalist or someone educated, who wrote the letters. This explains why the descriptions of the killer varied, heavy-set versus lighter build, and why the handwriting never matched the prime suspects. Theory 2. The hoax. Some researchers believe the Zodiac letters were a hoax written by a journalist to sell papers, latching onto unrelated murders to create a serial killer narrative. If true, the Zodiac is the greatest ghost story ever told. Conclusion: The Legacy of Evil. December 20th, 1968. It started with a gun in the dark. It ended with a question mark. The Zodiac Killer predicted his own legacy. He said, "I am waiting for a good movie about me." In October 1969, I killed a man, and the police watched me walk away. The case remains open in Riverside, Napa, Vallejo, and San Francisco. DNA technology is advancing. The ciphers are breaking. The shadows are getting smaller. But until a name is written in stone, the Zodiac remains the ultimate Sigma, a man who beat the system, terrified a nation, and vanished into the fog. The Zodiac vanished half a century ago, but the world he created never left us. We lock our doors differently now. We glance into our rearview mirrors more often than we admit. We read anonymous threats online and wonder if someone somewhere is smiling at our fear. Because the Zodiac understood something most killers never will. Murder ends a life. But fear rewrites history. He didn't just take victims. He took control. He forced police to chase ghosts. He made newspapers beg for his attention. He turned psychologists, cryptographers, and everyday citizens into unpaid investigators in his game. And that game never truly ended. Every time someone opens a cold case for him, every time a new documentary drops, every time a name trends because maybe this is him, the Zodiac wins again. Not with bullets, not with knives, but with curiosity. Because what terrifies us the most is not what we know, it's what we almost know. 100 suspects, 1,000 theories, millions of arguments online. But in the end, there are only two truths. 1. The Zodiac could still be alive, hidden in plain sight. A grandfather eating breakfast while the world dissects the crimes of his youth. Or 2, he died decades ago, taking his secret to the grave. And we are chasing a phantom that no longer exists. Which is worse? A killer who got away, or a myth we will never escape? Think about this. If the Zodiac were caught tomorrow, fingerprints, DNA, confession, absolute certainty, would the legend die? Or would he become larger? Would he finally get what he always wanted? A name that the entire world knows? Because the Zodiac never cared about the bodies he left behind. He cared about being remembered. He told us exactly who he was. I like killing people because it is so much fun. Man is the most dangerous animal of all. This is the Zodiac speaking. To him, every murder was a message. Every message was a performance. And every performance demanded an audience. We are still that audience. His case file sits in police evidence rooms. But the real case file, the one he wanted, is engraved in our imagination. The Zodiac isn't unsolved because we lack information. He's unsolved because we were never the ones holding the rules. He built a labyrinth with no exit. He wrote puzzles with no solution. He created a villain that can never be erased. Because he made us finish the story. And here's the coldest truth of all. If a man's ultimate goal is immortality, then the Zodiac already won. The cipher isn't the mystery. The identity isn't the mystery. We are the mystery. Why do we keep searching? Why does the symbol still haunt us? Why do we stare into the darkness, looking for a shadow that no longer needs to exist to frighten us? Because somewhere in that darkness, in an attic box of dusty evidence, in a fingerprint smudged on a taxi door, in a strand of hair sealed inside an envelope, the answer waits, not to free us from fear, but to feed it. The Zodiac promised he would never be caught. Maybe he was right. Or maybe the final cipher is already solved, and we haven't recognized it yet. The Zodiac is the most dangerous animal of all, not because of who he killed, but because of what he created. A puzzle that survives the killer, a horror that outlives the crime, a story that refuses to end. And somewhere, someone knows the truth. It might be buried in a notebook. It might be hidden in a confession no one listened to. It might be sitting across a dinner table tonight, watching the news, smiling at the fact that a million eyes still follow a symbol he drew on a car door in 1969. Until that last piece surfaces, until that stamp is tested, until that fingerprint matches, we are left with only one conclusion. The Zodiac isn't gone. He is unfinished. Who do you think he was? Let us know in the comments. Subscribe for the next file.